That's okay, thank you. If you can't hear me, just tell me to crank it up. I got 9 kids, so I'm used to projecting. But in all seriousness, I appreciate your understanding. I forget what came up, but something happened. And it may have been some family-related thing, because I was scheduled to be here. Maybe it was the last time y'all met, and I didn't show up. So for those of you who came then, others who might have come and thought I was going to be here, and then I left you hanging, sorry. This would have been a good night to leave you hanging if I was trying to do that, because what a beautiful night. And I mean that when I say it. Thank you all for being here, because on a night like tonight, it's tempting to be a lot of other places, but you chose to be here. Thanks for caring about this country enough to be here. And honestly, Dan, I appreciate your prayer, because his comments, I hope you hear his heart and his passion, because what so many people in this country have forgotten is the degree of sacrifice and the fragility of this incredible gift we've been given. That liberty, which was indeed, as our founders understood, endowed by our Creator, not by government, was endowed by our Creator, but we have taken it for granted. We've forgotten the sacrifices that have A, created it, and or B, have allowed this to become something that we just assume will always be there. And here's a man who has seen in his own country where those same assumptions were not what they turned out to be. You see the danger of socialism. You've seen it. You've witnessed it firsthand. And we have people literally singing the praises of it in this country as if it's something new. And I don't care whether it's socialism, communism, I don't care what ism, what version of it you would want. It is a remarkably dangerous thing if we allow it to take root. The other thing that he commented on is how our founding fathers talked about this being a constitution, being biblically grounded. It was. It's not quoting scripture. But John Adams, actually, it wasn't Madison, it was John Adams. I'm paraphrasing him. But he said our Constitution and our definition of government was created by a godly people for a godly people, and it is wholly inappropriate or unable to be applicable for any other. And again, I'm paraphrasing him. But in other words, they understood from the very beginning that while it wasn't attempting to be a religion or espouse a set religion or demand that everybody follow a religion, that it was created by religious people, God-fearing people, biblically based people, and they designed it intentionally to be a government that would guide people of such mind. And so not everybody, even at that time, shared it. Not even every one of the founding fathers had the exact same mindset as one another. But in general, just as today, America is governed with a fundamental underlying group of principles, so too it was then. And it is a slippery slope. And so I come back to thanking you for being here. Because I'll tell you, this is not a game. In all of the shots that are taken at me, and I appreciate some of you take it a lot more personally than I do. And I apologize for those of you that do, because I would encourage you to do what I do. Ignore the haters. And it just makes life easier for you. Because they're going to be there. They're going to be the naysayers, and they're going to poo-poo. And it's interesting, because Spiro Agnew said once long ago about the very same people. He called them the nattering nabobs of negativism. What a great alliterative phrase that was. And it's very true. And this was 50 years ago that he said that, or close to it, in the early 70s. It's the same nattering nabobs that have been around forever. So thank you for not being among that crowd. Thank you for being against that crowd. And I could sit here and give you a stem winder on any number of things, but you didn't come here to get my thoughts per se, unless they're driven by your questions. So what do you want to talk about? Anything, any question on anything at all. Yes, sir.
It's not a question. I just think everybody in here would like to thank you sincerely for your stand on protecting life.
Somebody asked me, is it easy to be the governor? And the answer is, it's not always easy to be the governor, but it is simple, if that makes sense. And this was both simple and easy for me because of my value system. And again, not everybody shares it. But to me, there is nothing more sacred than the sanctity itself of human life. And our founders understood it, that this too, like liberty, was one of those inalienable rights. It wasn't created by government. Government doesn't have the right to take that. It is inalienable. It was endowed by our Creator. It's not just some flowery words. That was a recognition of truth. And it's still true. You all I'm guessing based on just the comments that have been made thus far, some of the nods of affirmation when things are said, the fact that you open in prayer, and that you appreciate the power of that, you're generally people of faith. But I will say this, not to preach, but this is the kind of thing that when you're running for office, as I am, you answer at the ballot box. And the comment was made earlier about the power of one vote. A guy who knows how 1 + 1 + 1 had added up to 83, and it made a pretty big difference. So some of you know that too. So my point is, one vote is powerful. I'll come back to what I was going to say in a minute. When I first ran, someone said, what difference can one person make? And what I said then was an iteration of what was said at the outset of this, which is more than none. More than none. One can always do more than none. But the comment that I was going to make, which I've now forgotten, I don't want to preach to you, but here's what I know. What I believe, whether people share it or believe it or not, when you run for office, you answer to the voters, one at a time. You answer at the ballot box. People go in the ballot box, and what people say on that day determines what happens to you politically. But I say very unapologetically to people who agree with me and people who don't, people who believe what I do and people who don't. I'm more confident, frankly, certainly as confident or more confident than the voters decide on election day who wins the election. There's going to be a day that I'm going to stand before my Creator. I just am. Again, whether people believe it or not, I do. And I'm more interested, frankly, in what I hear on that day than what I hear on election day. And so this is why it is simple to stand up for something like human life. I'm playing the long game here. I'm looking at it in the eternal perspective, not the politically opportunistic one. The fact that it's even contentious, the fact that people even consider it political as to whether you're for life or not is remarkable. That is a false narrative foisted upon us. We've been told to believe that that's political. It's not political. We've been told that it's political so that we'll shut up about it. That's really what it is, because you don't want to talk about politics and upset the dinner or upset somebody's pleasant conversation. That's silliness. The reality is it's bigger than politics. It is a matter of life and death. And so you're welcome. But it's easy for me. That's both simple and easy. Anything else? Question? Anything at all? Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a statement. Most people here know I used to race horses. And I spent a lot of time in Chicago. And you know how the builders in Chicago have been indicted. I had a guy ask me, why do you like Matt Bevin? I said, because I trust him. After Steve Beshear and what happened in the States, you have to trust the guy that's leading your state, and you can trust Matt.
Trust is something you can lose like that. And deservedly so when it's been broken. And I don't take it for granted that a person who has trusted me once is going to trust me again. I really don't. And so I'm grateful for that, and I need to continue to earn your trust and to keep that trust. But I'm grateful to you for it. There has been, in a lot of states, in a lot of countries, in a lot of places in the world. Why? Because humans are involved. Whenever humans are involved, what I'm about to say happens. And that is, there's just a lot of corruption in politics everywhere. And there has been, in this state, probably a lot more than average among states in America. And when you had in the previous administration, I'm not going to turn this into a ripping people kind of thing, but this is just a statement of fact that you've heard a fraction about this compared to a house that I bought, for crying out loud. I mean, God bless the poor man who sold me that house. Here's a guy who had a good, normal, decent, anonymous life and made the mistake of selling me a house. Oh my gracious, they destroyed this guy, tried to. Luckily, he's made from fairly tough cloth, but that's crazy. The sad reality is I have the house that I did have for 20 years. I still own it. I haven't sold it yet because I feel bad for whoever would buy it. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. They would destroy whoever bought the house. So now I need it with nobody in it. But anyway, that's it. I digress. We have corruption that has existed for a long time. And in the previous administration, the guy that oversaw personnel for 6 of the 8 years of the previous government, oversaw all the contracts and a lot of the things that were moving back and forth, dollar-wise, big contracts, but also the hiring of key people, was a fellow who during those years, and as the years wound down, he quit his job in the last couple of weeks and then became, this is the ambassador of Japan calling me, but I'm going to let it go.
Like you did in Brandon.
This is actually a wonderful man. I'll call him back. He's a good guy. I'll come back to why he's calling in a minute. But during those 6 of those 8 years, you had a guy operating in a way that was not known to the outside world, but was known very much to the previous governor, despite what they would have you believe, because then his son, who became the Attorney General, then hired this very same guy to be his number 2 Attorney General. He was the Deputy Attorney General, the number 2 law enforcement guy in the entire Commonwealth, the head of personnel and contracting for the previous governor, and then the number 2 law enforcement guy under the new Attorney General. That guy's now in federal prison. will be for years. Because under both of them, the last and this current administration, he's handing out boxes of cash, buying and selling this state, unbeknownst to him, handing some of those last boxes of cash to FBI agents who he thought were like the previous people that he was handing them to. This is the kind of thing that unfortunately has been going on for too long. These are the kind of things that this should not be happening. And so it doesn't matter. It's not the party. I'll be honest, this goes back to the trust thing. It's not whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. It's whether you shoot straight with people, whether you're honest. There are many good, decent, honest Democrats, and there are many very dishonest and untrustworthy Republicans. Party does not make you. It is a function of your values, the caliber of who you are. These are the things that quite literally should define the people that we support. And so to that end, I will do my best to continue to earn your trust over and over again. Really will. What other questions, comments, thoughts? Yes, sir, in the back.
With the AG concentrating on making this ruin, which I doubt he's going to make it anyway.
Well, he might. We'll come back to that. I would have agreed with you more a few weeks ago than I would right now. We'll come back to it.
Okay, but his office is sidestepping some situations. I've had questions, legal issues, possible security issues, and state-related situations. And I get sidestepped. Ask them, get a hold of HR. Well, it has to do with HR. Communicate to them. It's no reply. How does a person handle something?
There's only so much I can do with another office. In other words, I can't make him return your call.
Oh, well, not that. This time, with the AG himself.
Don't reelect him. Maybe now is perhaps, but yeah.
But how is there a way that a person can get with the office to communicate other than the AG himself?
What I would suggest is go ahead. There's a guy immediately to your left. That guy right there. Tom, and I'm not outing you, Tom, by this, but Tom works in my constituent services office. Get a hold of Tom. And Tom, give him your information afterwards. Get a hold of him. If there's a way I can help connect you to what you need, we'll do it. And honestly, Tom is outstanding on this front, works in that office where we try to bridge gaps that are created sometimes. So I'll do what I can.
And just to give you a little lifetime Democrat a few meetings ago, hashtag I walked away, brother.
Never too late. I will say this, I would not be the governor today if it were not for the votes of a whole lot of Democrats. A ton of Democrats. A lot of good, decent people who vote their values and not their party. And there's still tons of them in this state. It would not be possible to get elected as the governor in this state if you did not get their votes. But for those of you who realize that your party has kind of left you, certainly at the national level, and frankly even increasingly at the state level, good for you for just saying enough already. And again, what people do is their business. How they register, it's really a function of how they vote that matters more than how they register. But increasingly, it is remarkable the separation values that we're seeing at the national level between the parties. Not like the Republicans are just a bunch of choir boys and got it all in lockstep, but gracious, the Democrat Party at the national level is going so hard in the other direction, turning its back on God and country and life and all these core fundamental things. Pretty soon they won't even be free for Apple and Chevrolet. Seriously, it's like all of it. Sad to me, actually. It really is. And I feel for folks. And in the state, I'm telling you what, if you're in this room, and you're over the age of 40, and you've lived in this state your whole life, the odds are very high you were at one point a Democrat, if you're not now. Not all of you, but it is more than a 50-50 chance that you were, significantly more. And that was just the way it was. And the tide is starting to turn a bit. And again, it's driven by values as much as anything. Yes, sir.
Defend you to my fellow UFO.
No, you fans. Here's what's crazy. You can't take your sacred breath. Short of me bringing you a national championship in something, I don't know what I can do. I've lived in Louisville for more than 20 years. I have been to far more Louisville games. I've been to pick a sport. I've been there with my kids. I've been to the games that are easy to get to. I went, if you remember when the year we thought we were around the table and potentially win a national championship for Louisville football. Brian was the quarterback. The one big hiccup we had, played West Virginia here, and it was freezing cold. I paid a ridiculous amount of money, freeze my keister off, and paid for an extra ticket to bring a friend of mine who was a diehard football fan to sit in there and freeze my butt off. And luckily we did win. But close game. Were any of you at that game by chance? You were there. If you remember the young man whose name I forget right now, who has some severe physical disabilities, but he was in the band, Patrick Hughes. Yeah, Hughes, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, Patrick Hughes. Do you remember he played at halftime that game? And also, I remember at halftime a guy named Don Miller, who was the head of the James Graham Brown Cancer Center, came out at halftime. I remember that game well because I paid up to be at that game. And my point being, I've always loved our teams. Always. This idiocy is driven by people who literally are trying to gin up something. Who loves it because actually they hate football, which is amazing. Courier Journal. I've never seen a paper that supposedly represents a community that has so much self-loathing of itself and the community it represents. They love to try to start something, and they gin it up and they give credence to things that are foolish. I'm going to read you something real quick because this is fun. This is very true. This was written by a guy you might have heard. His name was Abraham Lincoln. He wrote this, 150 years ago or something? This is what he said. Abraham Lincoln, 150 years ago, saying this. Could have been my answer to you. If I were to try to read, much less answer, all the attacks made on me, this shop might as well be closed for any other business. I do the very best I know how, the very best I can. And I mean to keep doing so until the end. If the end brings me out all right, then what's said against me won't amount to anything. And if the end brings me out wrong, then 10 angels swearing I was right would make no difference. It's as true then as it is now, and it is true as man is flawed. We've been flawed from pretty much the get-go. Not quite. We had a few days, but it didn't take long. Yes, sir.
And I'm not going to solve the only question for the night. That this is a non-local question. My folks, my family group, I did not grow up there. My mother and my father are from Floyd County, Kentucky. And as you know, there's the Mountain Parkway Extension Project. It's about $200 million looking to extend through there. I keep on checking the website every day to see where things are with that. And I know firsthand experience that area is hurting bad. But with that said, I do hope to you that there's an option A and an option B on the table. You know which ones they are. If you go the option B, my thought from literally having family playing in the creek there and being there as a kid and knowing the culture and the people there, including some relatives I still have there. If you go through and you buy up all that land to say $10 million, you're going to destroy the culture forever of that part of eastern Kentucky. It will be demolished just to save $10 million. Those people suffer enough. They gave up property anyway when the first Mountain Parkway went through. He came in and took my great-grandfather's all his farmland. All the bottom land between the mountains, he lost all of that for Kentucky and the coal mine. So I urge him, Bill, plead with you, please, to consider that and keep that in mind because those are good people.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. And it's a good point. I will say this, a couple things about that, unless you really want to dig way in the weeds on transportation projects, but it's kind of a catch-22 because there is no economic opportunity that's organically popping up there with occasional exception. How do you connect people to the outside? Is it really a function of just a highway? Is it that? And that's to the heart of what you're saying. Not necessarily. Because you could build an 8-lane highway in there, and if 2,000 people a day are going to go in and out on it, then is it really helping? Makes people feel good. But that project, there are things moving. I can assure you, the decision as to whether you go A or B or some variation thereof is not driven by whether it's $10 million this way or that way. There's a lot of other moving parts. And for everybody who wants A, somebody with as loud a voice and as much of someone's ear as wants B, and it's just a early little situation. The one situation, though, that this and other things fell into, these are all part of what's called the 6-year road plan. And it used to be when somebody wanted it done, they'd go to the legislator, and the legislator, hey, if you're for me, I can get that into the road plan. So they'd get everything into the road plan. When I got elected, just another example of corruption in some measure. When I was elected, everything that had been told to people was in the 6-year road plan. There was a fraction of the money needed to actually do it. So for everything we had money to do, there were multiples of promises that were in the plan. And people had been told it was going to get done in the next 6 years. It was never going. So we've winnowed it down. We're still moving on some parts of that project, but not to the extent that had been promised, because frankly, the money was never there. Well, I mean, you may or may not like it, but this is how my approach is. And it's driven by this. I'll back up and I'll come back. I grew up well below the poverty level. neither here nor there. Half the people in this room, or maybe more, grew up the same way. Certainly a lot of people in Floyd County know what that's like. I shared a bedroom with my three brothers. We lived in a 3-bedroom house. My sisters were in one room. The 4 boys were in another room. My parents were in the other room. It was an unheated house just south of the Canadian border. We never had a shower, never had a TV, drove around $100 cars. When you grow up that way, it informs the way you think, and it informs the way you spend money and the way you think about spending money. How many of you in this room in your life ever had to buy your own bicycle? Did you leave that bicycle out in the rain? Of course not. Because you knew what you had put into it. You had a vested interest. I had to buy my own bike. I had to go work with it, and I came home. We didn't have a garage. We had a porch. I'd put that bike on the porch. I'd turn it over, and I would crank it, and I would drive that chain. And I would crank it, and I'd drive the gears, all of it. It was a 10-speed bike. I remember exactly. I spent $110 for it. It's a nice one. It took me a long time to earn that money and save that money. I bought it at Joe Jones Sports Shop. It was a Raleigh car. I say all only to say that as it relates to spending dollars on the roads or anything else, I spend it like it's my own money, like I earned it, because someone did. And some of it really is mine. I pay taxes. You all pay taxes. And I spend it as if it was money that I bought, like it was my own bicycle. And so I'm going to be, to the best of my ability, the best steward I can be of your money. Will I always be perfect? Will I know every A versus every B? Will I've always chosen in a way that everyone, even in this room, let alone 4.5 million other people, always agree with? Of course not. It's not possible. But will I always, to the best of my ability, be a good steward of the monies that you have entrusted to this state? You bet. I owe my parents and I owe my upbringing nothing less. Family does matter. And traditions do matter. And history does matter. And they're the things that have helped to form who I am and a whole lot of other people in this state. Other questions, thoughts on?
I apologize in advance because, like I said, you had said, he hasn't been on as long and he had made me Democrat. But I'm from Hardin County, Kentucky. Our local sheriff had 2 lawsuits filed against him. And I had gone to him with influence and racketeering where I had worked at the city of Wilmington. Found this corruption going on. His salary is $173,000, and $46,000 of that goes to retirement. The county judge's salary is over $220,000.
Doing the wrong line of work here.
And $59,000 of that goes into retirement. Taxpayers are not seeing this. Most taxpayers, this is crazy. How do we stop something like this? I know that some of this is mandated from the state. And last year alone, the sheriff got a $5,000 increase. And you're just not
The
seeing it.
salaries are not mandated by the state. They're not. Well, I don't believe that's true. Here's the thing. I'm not an expert on sheriff salaries. What I do know is they vary widely from county to county, which is why I'm fairly confident they're not mandated by the state. Because if they were, you'd have a more commonality among them. Really, our $5,000 bonuses, not every sheriff got a $5,000 bonus last year, which means these are local decisions, probably made by your fiscal court, your magistrates. I have pretty good odds that they are. There may be in your county a slightly different methodology, but the chances are pretty good. You go back to the minutes. If it was legit, you will find in the minutes of the fiscal court something where there was a motion approval given to provide a $5,000 bonus. I would check for that. With respect to the value of somebody's retirement and or pension, what have you, some of that is driven just by what the obligation is. We could spend a lot of time, and I don't want to ruin our whole night by doing this, but we've made promises for years to pensioners that whether we should obey them or not, we have a legal and moral obligation to fulfill. But we made promises, frankly, the money was never there to back them up. It just wasn't. And people knew it. Some may not have, but many did. But guess what? A lot of people got reelected by whispering sweet nothings. Paraphrase a biblical phrase, it's the giving that hears what they want to hear. We've done a lot of that in this state through the years as it relates to benefits and things of this sort. Is it the fault of the individual receiving them? Not at all. Somebody says, I'm going to give you whatever. You do X, Y, and Z, and it's part of a contract. You don't know different. You'd say, sure, if I do X, I'll get Y. Great. It's not the fault of the individual. The person who's lying, saying, I'll give you $1 when I know I don't even have $1. You do this in exchange for me. You've gone into good faith. You've provided what you believe is the proper amount of value in exchange for the $1 you were promised, and I never had the $1. Who's at fault? Not you. Not the retiree, not the person working. Although that said, there's a lot of people who have worked for the state in a lot of different capacities, who for the better part of the last 25 years have kind of thought something's up. Nobody who's really been really confident that it was all going well. Despite what they were being told, smelled a rat for a while. There's too much going on. Again, this isn't to fault people, but you look even at KTRS, about 125,000 people plus or minus in it, either retired already or active, working toward retirement. And it includes teachers, it includes administrators, it includes even some custodial folks. There's a lot of people in and around the education system that are part of KTRS. So the number I'm going to give you is an average. But whenever I say to someone's like, well, I sure don't get that. Well, if you sure don't get that, that means someone else sure gets a much bigger number. But you take the last 12 months, people who've retired out of KTRS, and we could say the same thing on other ones. I just happened to have looked at this recently because somebody was arguing with me and I looked it up specifically. KTRS, people who've retired in the last 12 months, who have at least 30 years of service. And I mention that because how many in this room are retired from state government? Maybe y'all, a couple of y'all. Okay, so you understand, depending on which plane you're a part of, if you could retire at different levels, but if you stay longer, you get different multiples and things of this sort. You're incentivized. We did that on purpose, and it's a good thing. We want people to stay longer. But if you stay 30 years or more, you've probably hit most of the metrics that you could possibly get. You're going to get the highest multiples. You're going to have accrued the most sick days and or vacation days that you should be compensated for. And so people are allowed to roll up to 30% of the value of those into their last year's compensation, have high threes, or depending on what you retired from, maybe high fives. So there's a lot of different things. If you are 30 years or more, retired out of KTRS in the last 12 months, the average salary you will get for the rest of your life, and it goes up by an automatic 1.5% every year currently, based on the COLA that they have that not everyone else has, $62,374 a year for the rest of your life. Now, the average person coming out is in their 50s. You're in your 50s, and again, it's nobody's fault. They've worked hard. They deserve to be compensated for what they did as well as in a retirement. It includes other people too, administrators, superintendents, principals, a lot of folks. Because your average teacher actually gets less than that. But the average for people in that system, $62,374 plus more than $5,000 worth of value in healthcare, which goes up every year. So you think about that, $7,000, $8,000 a year for a person in their 50s who's probably going to live at least in their 80s and maybe their 90s. So 30 or 40 years of making $70,000 cost, and in reality it continues to go up, but let's say 70 on average over the course of their time. Say you live 35 years at 70,000. What is that? You live 40 years, it'd be like $3 million. 40 years would be $2.8 million. My point is, it's not that person's fault. They didn't do anything wrong. They did what they were told to do, and they expect to get what they were promised in return. We as a state can no longer afford to keep promising future employees what we have promised to past employees and current employees. Because if we do, then we know we're lying to the future people, and we're frankly guaranteeing that we won't have it to deliver to the people that are currently working. So back to what can be done about salaries and things, I'm a big believer in local control. Your local fiscal court should be holding this to account.